Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Bernard sent me a note. Said, Steve, check out this story. Man recorded video of himself driving at 130 miles per hour on a Connecticut highway. From WFSB, Rob Polanski writes this version of the story. And the question is, Steve, is that news that the man drove that fast? Well, it is news when he filmed it and posted on social media, and then law enforcement saw the video, looked for clues in the video as to his identity and where he did this, and figured out he did it locally, and then said, well, this is actually evidence of a crime, and they arrested him. And so some people need to understand that social media can come back to bite you, and this is one way it can come back to bite you. So a man is accused of recording himself speeding at 130 miles per hour along Route 7 in Norwalk, and then he publicly posted it according to state police. Troopers have charged the 36-year-old man with reckless driving while using a handheld device, and second-degree reckless endangerment. And I suspect the handheld device is what he was using to film himself as he was doing these things. State police said they became aware of Instagram and Facebook videos that showed a driver traveling at speeds of about 133 miles per hour. Investigators recognized the strip of highway as Route 7 in Norwalk. They noted that the speed limit along that section of road is 55 miles per hour. One video showed the man's 1970 Chevrolet Nova speedometer accelerate from 56 to 133 miles per hour, and that video is approximately 18 seconds long. Now, the 1970 Nova is a classic car. For those who don't know, back in the day, the Nova was a less expensive car from the factory, and as a result, on the used car market in the late 70s, they could be picked up really, really cheaply. And as a Chevrolet, dropping in another engine was pretty easy to do if you wanted to do that. But of course, a Chevy small block would fit in there quite nicely, referring to the engine compartment. And I know this because at least two of my brothers owned Novas at one time or another. I think it was actually three. They're an extremely common car, easy to get parts for, and easy to work on. So a timestamp on the video showed it was March 27th, and the privacy settings were set to public. So anybody could see this, and it was dated March 27th. Investigators said they noticed tattoos on the driver's right arm. The video had been shot with the driver's left hand. This is some heavy-duty detective work going on here, my friends. With information gathered over social media, state police said they were able to get a registration from the Department of Motor Vehicles database, which pointed to the owner of the vehicle, who is the man that they then sought out. Troopers said they made contact with the man on March 30th, and so it took only a few days for this to come to a conclusion with respect to him being caught. After they spoke with him, and based on information obtained over the course of the investigation, they were able to obtain an arrest warrant on March 31st. Notice the term warrant. That's very important here. He turned himself in on Tuesday. He's held on court set $100,000 bond and transported to Stamford Superior Court for a same-day arraignment. So I got to tell you a couple things here. One of which is, in many states, reckless driving is not a civil infraction. It's not a mere ticket. It is actually a misdemeanor where you can get jail time for it. And quite often, along with the jail time, if convicted, you can lose your driving privileges for some time. And in Michigan, that is a hard restriction, meaning that you just lose it. You don't necessarily have the ability to go into court and say, well, Your Honor, it's a hardship. I need to be able to drive to and from work. Too bad. And even a first offense drunk driver can get the restricted license to get to and from work. But a person convicted of reckless driving, not necessarily. So that's one thing. The other thing is actually a bunch of things here. And the other thing is that many of you probably know that people post stuff on the internet all the time of them speeding and doing things like a lap around Manhattan or a drive cross country in the Cannonball. And there's a fabulous, fabulous documentary out there about the Cannonball Run where they do a heavy, deep dive into Alex Roy's record-setting drive across America when he basically revived the Cannonball to become the modern Cannonball. And Alex Roy's record was broken later by other people, including Ed Bolian from VinWiki. But Alex Roy outfitted a BMW with all kinds of equipment and had a co-driver and a camera person sitting in the back. And they documented the entire drive because they were making sure that people would believe them when they said they had done it. And they tried one attempt, got halfway across America, and had a failure in their fuel system, which they believe was a fuel filter. Didn't figure it out in time. They did it a second time, and they did it, and they actually broke the record that had been set previously. And then they sat on the video for over a year because they wanted to make sure the statutes of limitation had run in any of the states that they had passed through. They might have done something contrary to the law. And I hear people say this all the time. They say, yeah, you wait a year because the statute of limitations on a traffic ticket's a year. And that's an interesting thing to say because, number one, driving cross country, you travel through more than one state. That's kind of how states work. And so you need to know what the statute of limitations is in any given state. And it's not the same from state to state. As I like to say, laws vary, V-A-R-Y, vary. Right now somebody going, wait, that's what you mean? Laws vary wildly from state to state. So it might be a year in one state, and you cross the line to the next state where it becomes 2 years. The reason I'm telling you that, in Michigan, it's 2 years. Now, nobody drives through Michigan in a cannonball run, but it is 2 years in Michigan. And so I suspect there's some other states out there where it's more than a year. I suspect that. Now, I've never been asked to do the research on it, so I've never done the research. But keep in mind that this kind of speeding can be considered reckless driving in many states. And it's not just a civil infraction, so you'd need to find out what the statute of limitations is on a misdemeanor such as reckless driving. And it might be more than a year. It might be. And by the way, and again, this is just a heads up to those of you who might be interested in trying to challenge some of those cannonball records. If you watch the documentary, by the way, I love Alex Roy. He's a very, very interesting guy. He's a fascinating guy. And when I watched the documentary, it was one of the most, I actually felt it when he actually set the record. Talks about how his father would have been proud of him and so on. And the ingenuity, the effort he put into it, everything he did to make that work, I respect. But you have to understand that underlying all of this is there were some laws apparently possibly broken. I don't know. And keep in mind that it's not just a speeding ticket. It would have been potentially reckless driving, but also an argument could be made, and this is the one thing I'm always curious about, is there are prosecutors out there and police out there who will look at something and try to get creative. And what they could have done, if somebody had wanted to, they could go, let me get this straight. There's two guys working together to break the law. Sounds a lot like a conspiracy. And they're using police scanners and radar detectors and laser detectors and infrared and thermal imaging equipment, which, again, this is like Mission Impossible level stuff. But they're using all these devices to defeat the law, to get around the law, to avoid law enforcement. And in many states, as I've mentioned before, using those devices while you are breaking the law can also be a violation of the law. See, no one ever asks me about my thoughts on the cannonball because they're scared I'm going to give them all this scary information. And so during the original races across country, one of the guys who set a record later admitted that he'd had a spotter in a plane flying ahead of him, radioing him information about whether the roads were clear or not from police. And Alex Roy, in his documentary, did the same thing. And again, somebody could look at that and go, wait, now you've got three people. You got a pilot, co-driver, driver, and the three of them are coordinating how to break the law. So I'm not sure if anybody in the history of mankind or of the automobile has ever been prosecuted for conspiracy to commit reckless driving. I'm not even sure if that would fly. But somebody could come along and say, you're using all this equipment, you guys all got together, you're all breaking the law. And some, like I said, some very, very aggressive and creative prosecutor could probably conjure up something out of that. That would be a little worse than a straight up driving ticket. So keep that in mind. But also you'll notice that this says after they spoke with him, and some people would say, well, there was his mistake, he shouldn't have talked to him. But then again, after they spoke to him, they saw the tattoos on his arm, and it matched the video, and da-da-da-da. There's all kinds of things going on here. So lesson for you of that generation who grew up with TikTok and Instagram and whatever else it is the kids are using these days, Pinterest. That would have been the ultimate if he'd posted something on Pinterest about this, along with his doily collection. So, again, it's a fascinating story. And Bernard sent to me, he said, first-time emailer, long-time listener. So, Bernard, this is the first time. I'll give you a shout-out for letting me know about this. And reminds me of the old talk radio days, maybe Bruce Williams, somebody calling in, hey, first-time caller, long-time listener. But man recorded a video of himself driving 130-plus miles per hour on a Connecticut highway. After the police watched the film, figured out where it was, and realized it was nearby. And the date stamp meant it was soon enough to where they could go after him. They went after him, and he has now been charged with some relatively serious driving infractions. So there you go. Rob Polanski wrote it for WFSB, and Bernard sent it to me. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. They're sure housework won't kill you, but why take the risk?